Okay, we're recording. Welcome to the first working group API expression meeting. We haven't got an agenda document yet, so I don't know how you guys want to start. I can share my screen and open the mission statement. I don't know. We can go over it, or we can go over the apply tasks first. What do you suggest?
Didn't we have to solve something? I saw Aaron mention that we have to solve something during the meeting. Let's solve stuff that we have to solve. Remember?
We had to remove stuff, and that's still bothering me a lot. That could use some more input because it's frustrating. But aside from that, I'm not sure.
I thought it was just a label that needed to get added.
Yeah, I added that. Yeah, and the PR is merged, and I added a recurring Zoom meeting, which is this one, and I have to update the PR, so the document so it contains the meeting.
Are you talking about this thing?
I'm talking about.
This was not an easy process to create this working group.
Yeah.
Not expecting it.
Yeah, fortunately we don't do this every day, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one. Aaron said we have to.
Yeah. I sent you a link in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, well, the link you have at the bottom, the 4715.
Where's Zoom gone? Chat.
Just click on the 4715 at the bottom.
There we go. Zoom in the Linux Flatpak is great. Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked Federico, because he helped me yesterday with the Zoom login, if he can create a drive, because I don't want to create a meeting doc that's in my account and nobody can own. So I would prefer to have a shared drive folder for stuff like that.
Sure.
And we'll see how that works. I'm opposed to creating it in my org because it might be gone at some point. So, yeah.
I think we're talking about making an agenda document of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah. I own the SIG API machinery one, and I kind of regret that because it means when people who haven't thought to join the mailing list to try to get access, I get emailed. And not enough people think to join the mailing list.
I think you're also owning the old apply exclamation mark folder, and that's a normal drive folder. So if you get I know there's a SIG testing shared drive I have access to. So if we had one of those, everybody would have access to all the documents, but nobody would own them.
Yeah, but that's still, they have to join a mailing list or something for that.
Yeah.
And my employer doesn't permit opening documents to everybody. I have to share it deliberately with something. I think some people create a document with their personal account and share that. So
that makes sense.
I don't know if somebody's brave enough to do that. I think you can turn off notifications.
I guess we'll have more documents in the future than just meeting documents. I was aiming for a folder, but that's even worse when you share it with a personal account. So
I don't know. Can you make a folder that's open to the whole world? I don't know if
you can share it with a you can share the folder with a group, but everybody in. So if I create a document in the folder, it's still owned by me, and you
Right.
can't transfer ownership that easily. So that's where the shared drives come in, because the shared drive owns the objects inside, and not the people. So I sent Paris a message because I read something about a G Suite for the Kubernetes team. Maybe they can do it with that, but I didn't get a response so far.
Should we just make a temporary document until we get this figured out, so at least we have something to write an agenda in?
That's good.
Should we make the agenda items in the document that we use to keep track of things?
No, I don't think so. I think just like the API machinery agenda notes document.
Agenda/meeting notes.
Yeah.
I'm already getting used to typing that long of a workgroup name. Yeah. Where are we? What is the date? 14th. Thanks. Okay. So
What
how
are we
do we
going to
start
talk
this?
about?
Yeah. I had the mission statement open. I don't know how often I read it, but I never discussed it. I only read it and was told to open a work group for it. So I don't know how we should start this.
Yeah. Let's see what people come up with. We have most of the server-side apply tasks in the working group apply document that we need to rename, by the way.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have new tasks based on these items that we can see in the mission statement. But I don't know exactly what they are right now.
Yeah, we had finish server-side apply.
My thinking was people would show up and help us, and it looks like Tim is actually on the call.
Sorry, I'm just jumping between meetings all week.
Yeah, the agenda document will help collect a place for topics in advance of the meeting. I think that's the way to go for future meetings.
Yes.
Yeah. So, one thing we used to do was to keep track of who was doing what. Are we planning on doing that? Do we keep doing that?
I think so. Like, there's nothing wrong with the work items document. I wouldn't change that.
Yeah, so a good structure maybe would be, let's talk about the topics that people have in mind, and then we look at the tasks that we have and make sure that we're doing progress.
Yeah, also we now got an hour, so if we have scaling problems like Tim mentioned, we can do the stand-up part in the part where people don't have time, and we have, so we can switch it.
Yeah,
because that's
different.
The discussion of topics is mostly more interesting for the people joining, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm lost. What scaling problems we're talking about?
I think you mentioned you had to juggle the events because you had something in parallel.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few time slots in the week that are Europe friendly. And so there's necessarily going to be conflict. This just happens to conflict exactly with another meeting that I actually generally have to go to.
Okay. Yeah.
It's unfortunate. So I'll just have to do my best to juggle and split time.
Yeah. If we can do anything, so if more people have problems with the time frame, we also can see where something fits. I can't see most calendars, so
yeah, I
probably
mean,
know better.
There's more SIGs than there are time slots between 8 and 11 a.m. California.
Yeah, that's...
So, you know, it becomes the scheduling problem. Ha. Somebody should write a scheduler.
Yeah.
Yeah, this time is also not good for me.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we can do the usual trick is to try to throw up a doodle or something, right? But I'll do what I can personally. If there's a preponderance of people who can't make this, then maybe we seek out a different time, a different day.
Yeah, it looks like Stefan SDTTS is also not here, and David Eads is also not here. I don't know what their interest level is, but I would expect Stefan at least to be interested. So maybe this time is not good for them either.
So let's have somebody throw up a doodle then.
Yeah.
Last time I looked, I was able to get a 2-week free trial. Does anybody have a paid or a free trial that they can use to throw up one?
Do you need one to create a doodle?
If you haven't had your free trial, you can get a 2-week free trial. Otherwise, you need a paid account, as far as I know.
Okay, I've used Doodle privately a lot, and I never needed one. So
I mean, to create a poll. Of course, anybody can vote, but to create one.
really,
There's also since there's only so many time slots, there's also the possibility of just making a regular survey, like a Google survey.
yeah, we can do that. I'm new to the Doodle pricing. That's surprising and disappointing. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Can you attach the meeting notes link somewhere so I can access it? Maybe in the.
Oh yeah,
topics?
I have to share it with.
Okay, so it looks like we have a to-do here. Someone should be
That's
putting up
what I'm looking for. The notes.
Let's put it in Slack.
Thank you.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'll do it.
Okay. Good. Yeah, then we'll try to figure something out and share it with the mailing list, probably, and on Slack, and we'll see how the response is. Good.
All right. So since we have an agenda document now, and people with limited time who made a valiant effort to be here, do Tim and or Mike have particular things that you think we should discuss sooner rather than later? And the goal, or at least one of my goals for this group, is that we should actually do things and not just talk about them. So yeah, maybe that can constrain our like let's try to stay in the realm of possibility. If that makes sense.
That's no fun.
I think lots of us could go on for ages about things that we would like, but don't have time to work on. So
yeah, well, that's fair. I also think part of the responsibility of these working groups is to be aspirational. And if we're only defining things that we have time to work on, we're going to have very lackluster results. Whereas, you know, having some, I don't want to say intellectual, but some sort of abstract conversations about shoulds will give us a better course forward. Not that it should be exclusively that, but if it's exclusively not that, then I feel like we lose track of where we actually want to go. We're only looking as far as our feet.
I definitely agree with that. But if we do only that, this will not be very productive.
So
You'll find
you're
a balance.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike?
You're in violent agreement. We should do both.
Yeah, I believe so, except we need to, well, I'll speak for myself, right? Like I'm very interested in API expression and API machinery. And as a consumer and frequent reviewer of APIs, I find myself saying, gosh, I wish we had this thing, right? I have very little technical time to contribute right now and for the foreseeable future. If that means that I should not attend, I guess I'm okay with that, but that's not what I was hoping to create.
So I think what we can usefully do is define like work streams and start to list issues or like concrete chunks of tasks that drive towards a goal. If we have those, we can find people to help us do them. So I think that would be a good use of our time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Also,
And it might help us organize our meetings and deal with conflicts.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, I wouldn't see actually working on stuff a requirement for attending the meetings, because we need all the opinions we can get on many topics. Being there and discussing stuff should definitely happen.
Right.
So. So the mission statement already has some parent points that look like work streams. Do I understand those correctly?
Yes, that was the idea. Was to list some stuff there to get us started. Like I think one clear one is like fixing our documentation. Like there's two aspects to our API documentation that we could work on. One is just documenting the current state and all of its warts, and the other is documenting the state we would like it to have, and like what do we have to do to get there. A major problem with our current API documentation is that it's written almost entirely with, and I'm not talking about the documentation of particular APIs. I'm talking about the documentation of how to change the API. That's written almost entirely with built-in APIs in mind and not with CRDs in mind, but almost everything there needs to be understood and followed by CRD authors as well.
Yeah, you said almost a whole lot, but I think the almost is even generous. Like all of those docs were written before CRDs existed, and they haven't been updated since, or not in a meaningful way. And I sat down with it a few weeks ago and I went, oh my God, I want to rewrite this whole thing. And then I realized, actually, I have no idea what the right way to rewrite them in terms of CRDs.
Also, I'm not, I don't find it entirely convincing, many of the things that are said there.
Well, that's a different discussion. One we should have, but.
Yeah, so that's a good, like if somebody has time to start on like a skeleton of what a new API document would look like, that would working out the items in there would be a good way to have discussion about various bits of the documentation that are not convincing to everybody.
A few weeks ago, I guess a month ago, before all of this started happening, I had suggested to Jordan that we start with an outline and actually go, like I opened up the changing API doc and API conventions docs and realized there's a ton of overlap and there's no coordination between them. And actually the changing APIs doc is like 2 docs jammed into 1 doc, like literally just catnated together. The way I would attack it would be to start with an outline to make sure the outline captures all of the so you want to X sorts of use cases. And then there's actually I thought there was a lot of good meat in there, but the skeleton was all wrong.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of like what we really need is a flow chart. It's like, you know, I want to do this and like here's the decision tree you walk through to figure out what kind of API we're talking about and what your next steps have to be.
I usually find that a flow chart is a distillation of principles. And I think the docs we're talking about are really statements of the principles. And when you're dealing with difficult cases, you wander out of the boundaries that the flowchart author had in mind. So I like to focus on the principles.
I think we need both. I think users need the flowchart to make their life easier. But when the flowchart is inadequate, then we need the principles document. And right now we kind of had neither. We have one document that is kind of trying to be both, and it's not great.
Well, actually, we have two documents that are both trying to be both.
Sure.
Specifically, we have the API conventions doc, which is 20-some pages, which is updated fairly regularly. That I don't know when the last time I read it was. And not everybody agrees with, frankly. There are things in there like all optional fields should be pointers, and there are other API reviewers who are like, yeah, I only partially enforce that. And then there's the so you want to change the API doc, which has been, again, updated somewhat regularly, but sometimes wrongly. Like, we got all the pluralization stuff wrong, and now we're going back through and fixing it again. So what I would like to capture before attempting the doc, having started to attempt the doc, is maybe not the flowchart, but a more complete outline of what do we think all of the interesting use cases are for people who are making API, either building new APIs or making changes to the existing APIs. And if we could capture sort of all of the things that we identify as interesting, weird corner cases, for example, pluralizing a field or adding a new field or how to detect, immutable fields, those sorts of things, are all interesting use cases that were not part of the original documentation, that emerged organically as people were building APIs.
I would argue, in fact, I would argue that it's going to be the same people, more or less, creating APIs and modifying them.
You might be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of people who just want to add one field to pod or something like that, and they don't see themselves as creating a whole new CRD and schema lifecycle. They just want to add that one new field, and I don't think we have done a really good job of explaining to them exactly why they have to jump through some of the hoops they have to jump through.
Yeah, I agree. There's lots of people that want to just do one thing. Like they got this cool feature in mind, and it just requires one little extra bit of something to be plumbed through some API, and they're like not really interested in APIs in general. It's like not what they're trying to do. So
that's right.
And like often it's some sort of field, some sort of feature that we really do want, like the like ephemeral containers for pods, for example, and like the amount of hoops these people have to jump through to get an API changed in is.
I think ephemeral containers is a bad example because it's so huge, but take examples like we're adding literally an informative field to service called app protocol. There's really no implementation of it, and it's not clear what the person who's adding this field really has to do or why, except that they happen to work at Google so they can talk to me or Jordan or you.
Yeah. We have an additional problem where it would make logical sense for like Jordan or me or Tim or I don't know who else. There's only a handful of other people to write these documents, but we're all super busy. So I think if we want these documents to get written, we've got to carve up a task that is sensible enough for other people to do more of the work.
Hence my suggestion that if we can find an outline, like if we can come together on an outline, I think actually a first draft of these docs could be by cutting and pasting stuff out of the original docs into the new skeleton and then massaging the transitions. and actually that could result in a pretty good doc with obvious holes, whereas today we have a terrible doc with non-obvious holes.
Yeah, if you look at our website documentation, they've got quite a system of I don't even know what they're called, but there's the how-to guides and the concept guides, and if you try to change documentation, you'll often get a comment on them from them oh, this belongs in a concept section, not a how-to section or something like that. I think we need a similar theory for our API evolution documentation, so that we can take changes over time without it turning into a giant mess.
Maybe the info architecture stuff is, I mean, there's a science to writing good docs, and we can engage with those folks. They're willing to help us if we can tell them what it is that we want to do. Although I think that maybe the needs here are a little bit less rigorous. But it also goes, I think, to Mike's point of a flow chart versus principles. I think we have to figure out both. Here's the principle. Here's why you're being asked to do something. And if you don't care about that, here's the steps you need to follow to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Does anybody have both interest and time in drafting an outline? This might be a case where we're doing it even a poor first draft will nerd snipe somebody into finding time they don't actually have to help.
Yeah, I'm very interested in it. I got a sudden backlog. Last week I would have had time, except for a customer issue that ate up most of the week. And so this week I'm paying for last week. But I have my to-do list next to me, and 3 or 4 of the items on my to-do list are around API documentation backlog that I owe for SIGArch. So if I can get a co-victim here, a volunteer, voluntold, then I would be willing to sit and run through the existing docs, try to produce an outline, and then try to massage that first draft outline. And then, as Daniel says, nerd snipe the rest of you.
So I'm interested in this too, and probably don't really have time, but I'm probably going to offer some. I'm still trying to figure out how Tim's remark about he's talked about 2 things actually, outline and use cases. And so I understand how to put together an outline of principles, for example. Use cases are another matter. It seems to me. Is that making sense to you, Tim?
Yes, and maybe we really do want 2 docs, but they should cross-reference each other. And depending on how you're coming at the problem, it would be which doc you want to start with. I think we need a comprehensive principles and conventions doc. This is what we're asking you to do and why. Mm-hmm. And then I just want to add a field. Tell me how I can do these common things. And cross-link to this is why you're being asked to do this. If you don't care, don't click the link. Just follow the steps.
Yeah, I'm thinking the flowcharts really would be oriented around use cases, right? I mean, I can imagine for each use case, you'd write a flowchart.
Yes.
So I think maybe we're still talking about the same 2 basically kind of documents.
I think we are. They're just not. They're designed in isolation, and they're not cross-referencing each other, and neither one of them is complete.
Right. So I'm going to volunteer to work with you then on producing outlines for these 2 kinds of documents.
Excellent. I have to go look at the calendar and figure out when, but let's see if we can find time maybe later this week to just jump on a call and walk through the existing docs and see if we can extract the existing outlines. The table of contents exist, and then we can start arguing about how they maybe should look.
Okay. We'll finish up scheduling offline.
Yeah, perfect.
I don't actually have time, but if you want a 3rd person on there, let me know what time you come up with, and I'll see if I
I'll
can
copy you.
squeeze it in. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah,
I
that's-
have confidence that whatever we produce, you'll read, Daniel.
Right. Yes. I expect we're going to provoke review and commentary.
Yeah, I haven't had a single contact with both of the old documents and the topic mostly, so I'll happily read it. I'm not sure if I can help much.
Well, honestly, fresh eyes, like looking at it and going, this doesn't make sense to me, is actually super useful.
Then CC me, ping me. I'm happy to help.
All right.
My time is pretty flexible right now, so.
Lucky.
Well, still European time zone, but
Okay. So there's a lot of people now volunteering. We could do it in this time slot. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that effective if 10 people are doing it all in tandem.
No.
But maybe we can lay out some tasks and have everybody go off and do sort of an independent version and then merge them. Mike and I will take the action to come up with a plan for how to take next steps.
sounds good.
Sounds good.
And just to support us, though, the other interested people, how about you post to the working group Slack so we know who all of you are?
Yeah, great.
I'll start a thread.
I'm also updating the topics document so we can see that. I'm ready to draft the task for this specific item. If you guys want to have a look and modify or like, so we can all be up to date with what's going on.
Oh, well. Okay.
Do we have anything else today?
Let's see. I think that's already enough work. It would be very tempting to take up more items than we can reasonably make any progress on. There's somebody in the management chain around here who commonly repeats things like, I'd rather get 100% done on a few things than 80% done on many things. So we should consider that before we decide to make a small amount of progress with everything in the deliverable list here.
Right, but I also agree with Tim's thing. We should, kind of talk about aspirations, even if we don't schedule work on them immediately. I find the questions, this first topic here, desired state for the schema features, I think that is an interesting thing to discuss. I think the second one kind of is about the,
That's probably what we talked about right now. I think.
That's part of what I was going to say, but there's more to it than that. I have less to say about that, but it sounds like an interesting topic. I certainly like the idea of tools that can help with this stuff. So I find the third interesting. Third and fourth, really. I also agree with finishing up SSA. I mean, if there are problems with SSA, we definitely need to take care of that too.
Sorry, what's SSA here?
Server-side apply. And I anticipate once we have, we'll probably go through those later on in the meeting. Is that the intention? We've got a big document.
Yeah.
That I think Antoine and Kevin has put together.
And the last bullet here, I don't know if exactly what's meant by that. It sounds like it's either overlaps with the first bullet or the second bullet, what we just talked about, the docs, or the kind of stuff I've been working on, which is the stuff a developer needs to read and understand.
Yeah, the parenthetical there is trying to make it clear that the last bullet is about the current state, and the first bullets are about the desired state.
Yeah.
Right. We've
So there's,
built
I
some
guess the-
system, but we would like to have maybe a slightly different system in some respects.
I see. Okay. So we've been talking about the issues of what an API developer, we started talking about the problems that an API developer has, both creating and updating an API. There's another collection of issues, which is a developer of a client. He just wants to consume an API. The existing documentation for a developer is actually pretty bad. If you try to write a controller, all the things you have to understand, you go to look at the documentation for the pieces you use to write a controller. I've actually been working on that over the course of the past year. I think I've made it better, but it was really bad to begin with, and it's still not great.
I think we've hit this problem with apply as well. At some point, we had people who wanted to who built a Kubernetes Go client, which is not using the Kubernetes code to make it smaller, and they used the protobuf definitions and tried to send JSON built from the protobuf, which didn't work. So they were not happy they couldn't use apply with it.
Yeah, I think
Right.
that's one of the unfunded items in the, or we don't have a ticker yet for the work list. Making
Right. So I guess maybe I would
apply
call
workflow
it,
with the client.
yeah, but I think a little bit more broader. I'd say the first topic we discussed is the issues of API developers. The second topic is the issues for client developers.
Yeah.
This in the scope of this group? Are we taking care of clients in the group?
Let's see, did we write that down? It's not like we can't evolve our mission statement by sending TRs.
Absolutely agree, but we need to agree on what's part of it and what's not.
Yeah,
don't
maybe you want
think
to
we-
say it's not this group, but it's certainly.
I think in some sense, using an API, I don't know if this is a real distinction, but in my mind, controller is like writing a controller is one step above just using an API. And like I feel like API, what sorts of use cases? All right, see you, Tim. What sorts of use cases does our API schema intend to support? Is useful to both API authors and API users, but it doesn't, like, that wouldn't be enough information to go off and write a controller. I think that would be a separate, right? Like there's a lot of details that wouldn't necessarily be in that kind of document.
Yeah, there are a couple of things. First, we already have some work related to clients for server-side apply. And two, I think we have to be very careful. If we help people design APIs, we need to consider how they're going to use them. Otherwise, it's going to be an API that's pointless or useless or poorly designed. So I think we have, even if it's not in the scope to take care of controllers, we've got to be careful about these, right? We can't make APIs that are going to be used in a void. The APIs are not in a void, so.
Also, looking at the point about do we want to keep types go, how do we publish APIs, that's something where you have to take in mind how clients use it, because it's useless to expose something when it's not usable, like types go. We had people who didn't want to use our types go but built custom ones because it's a big repository. So I think it's at least at some point part of the scope.
Yeah, I'm tempted to say that like helping controller authors, like beyond the bounds of making sure our client library is usable, helping controller authors is a topic for API machinery in general more than this group in particular. I don't know if other people feel strongly that should be in scope. I'm just worried about putting everything in scope and then not being able to accomplish.
I agree.
On it.
I agree. We have to draw boundaries somewhere. So I guess I'm okay with, saying the problems of clients are mainly outside, but, as it was also said, the whole point of this is to support the clients, both the users and the controller authors. We have to bear their problems in mind.
I think like understanding the use cases or the sets of operations that this API style makes easy and the sets that it makes hard, like understanding that and therefore which clients it's appropriate for, that seems mandatory. I don't see how we can succeed if we don't do that step. But hand-holding clients through using it successfully is maybe not the goal, at least of this group.
Well, hand-holding, that sounds like it's a mentoring activity. I think we're talking about what to document. I think I can agree that for API, we can focus on the API expression issues without having to worry about all the details of documenting stuff for clients. I think we're agreeing. We have to keep the problems of clients in mind. That's the whole reason this stuff exists. That's the only reason this stuff exists is because they're clients.
Yeah, I guess I see this group as like one meta level removed from clients directly. It's the way we make clients' lives easier is by making it easy for API authors to do the right thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is a document like that, but as we have the changing API and API conventions docs, maybe there is a consuming API docs that also describes there is open API and protobuf and REST and how you use them. That's also already a good start.
Yeah, it's possible that if we have a really good set of developer-focused API mechanism documentation, that a client-focused set of documents would be really obvious to write afterwards.
Well, we could say, that part of our job here is to produce those, and that would in some sense be a check on our work. We can't claim success unless we have produced a good and convincing set of documents for how to consume these APIs.
Yeah, we can also defer the decision on this, keep it in mind, and see how we do on the developer-focused documentation. That's a possibility. I think it's plausible that we can't do everything at the same time. So even if
oh, it's certain we can't do everything at the same time.
even if we do decide to do both, we would do them in sequence anyway. In which case, it's not super important to decide whether the second thing in the sequence is in scope or not right this instant.
I agree.
We have, I think, 13 minutes left. I don't know, Antoine, Kevin, did you want to run through the existing apply work items just to see where we are?
Sure, I can. Yeah, we have a column here. So we still get, we collect our goals for 119, and that's mostly making kubectl server-side apply default. And yeah, the one part is this client-side to server-side apply transition. I think you had the discussion about if we can do it because of the breaking changes. I'm not sure what the result on this was. But aside from that, we have several issues regarding this.
Yeah, we had that in Slack.
Yeah.
And I was not in favor. Well, I thought the current plan was fine.
Can I ask a big stupid question about server-side apply? I was surprised when I learned the field manager is not being set to the username. I kind of understand why that's not necessarily the right answer, but it seems like having it be something completely independent is kind of problematic.
I mean, there's nothing preventing you from using your username if you want. I think we didn't do it by default because then there's PII issues to worry about. Right, like if you're storing a username, you have to worry about that.
Oh, there's that too. I was thinking it's not really the right abstraction because there can be many users that are really, in some sense.
I think that's the other distinction is you could have a single agent make changes on behalf of multiple appliers and want to keep them separate.
Right, and vice versa. You could have, in some sense, multiple users or processes acting as different users, but really in concert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is leading to my question now. In the case of kube control, what is it setting as the field manager?
I believe it's just kube control.
It is setting kube control right now, but that's a little confusing because you may have, one of the problems we have is that client-side apply conflicts with server-side apply. If you're setting an annotation with kubectl, it's always kubectl. So Julian is working on changing that so that each kubectl command has its own manager. So at least if you have a conflict with your own kubectl, you know what happened.
That's a good idea.
That's still surprising. You know, to some sense, you can say there's API, there's CLI, and there's UI, and they're really just different levels of veneer over the API. So the generality available in the API should be available in the CLI and the UI as well.
But you can explicitly set it no matter what operation you're performing.
Ah, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just the usability concern is just the default, and how can we change the expectation of a current client-side applied user the smallest amount? We opt everybody into server-side apply.
Yeah, and the general default for non-apply operations is the user agents of the client, and that's, I think, kubectl. I'm not sure if we are setting kubectl now as a field manager directly in kubectl, but usually it's a field manager as being defaulted to the user agent.
Yeah, I mean, you can explicitly set it with kube control if you wish.
Yeah.
The issue with making server-side apply default is to make sure we choose defaults that maintain as many of the current expectations as we can.
Yeah.
I'm actually okay with changing the expectations somewhat because we are adding more features. Like I know in some cases people are going to see a conflict when they first switch over to server-side apply, but I think that's actually a useful conflict because as long as we do it correctly, right? Like you shouldn't get a conflict if you didn't change anything or only change the things that you were managing with client-side apply. We should try and avoid giving conflicts in that situation. But if you're getting a conflict because like HPA changed the replicas field or you ran some other kube control command that like changed your image or something, and when you switch over to server-side apply for the first time, you get a conflict on that, I think that's fine and actually useful because it's telling you something about your system that you may not have known.
Yeah, I think we mostly agree on that. I'm a little concerned for people with CI/CD and it's going to break their use case, but
yeah,
they have to fix it anyway, and they'll probably do something wrong anyway. So yeah.
I thought about that a little bit, and at first I agreed with you, but then thinking about it more, like if you're in this condition with the CI/CD system, your system is not doing the thing that you thought it was doing, and you probably want to know about that. So I think that is actually, it's more important for people with CI/CD systems to get these conflicts.
Yeah.
I guess we should ask, Julian, are you blocked on anything, or can we make your life easier?
I can see Julian right now.
I thought I saw him on the call earlier.
Yeah, I think he dropped out.
Okay.
What's your question? Oh, you can ask the question on the Slack channel.
Oh, I was just I think a useful part of the exercise here is making sure people aren't blocked.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I talked to Julian like twice this week or last week, so hopefully he's not blocked on anything.
Sounds good.
He's finishing a couple of things with regard to dry run, I think, and a few things like these, and renaming the field manager for kubectl. And I think he wants to get that done before moving on to something else, to these specifically.
Okay. Defaulted associative keys.
Okay, yeah, so I moved this as a much higher priority because this is actually going to break most people's deployment, since many people have TCP and have a port number without the TCP, and this doesn't work today. It's going to just fail if you server-side apply. This is not a good, we absolutely need to fix that.
And it looks like Jenny already has a PR out.
Yeah, I have a PR out for this, but I don't know if it's still mergeable. I probably have to rebase it or something, but yeah, this is mostly done. I think we just had to make a decision on how to represent these default values in the API.
Yeah, it just got closed, but that happens.
That's just
Been there for a while, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're blocked in the reviewer then, it sounds like.
No, that's not really the case. I mean, I know why I never reviewed this code. We don't know if this is the right approach.
So you're blocked on what? On us having a powwow?
On us deciding on something, yeah.
Okay.
This is reading the default from the Open API so that we can use the default when we create the field set.
But this
today-
PR doesn't actually change the Open API or talk about how to get the value from the Open API. It just changes SMD so that you can express a default value in the schema. So I don't know how controversial this is.
I see.
How are we going to get the defaults in the Open API?
I mean,
Well,
probably from the Open API. I mean, they already have defaults expressible in Open API.
So how are we going to get the TCP field by default in the Open API?
We would just add well, we can talk about this outside the meeting, probably.
Yeah, let's sync up on this later. I think we do want to express, this goes back to one of the working groups goals, which is what sorts of things do we want to express in the schema? I think default value, if it's a simple one, should be expressible in the schema.
Well,
so,
it's already done by CRDs anyway, so.
Right. So it's not in the types.go format. So we need to figure out a way to get it there. So if this forces the issue, I'm okay with that actually.
Okay. I think I remember why I was not super agreeing with that. Yes, it should be in the types.go. We should do exactly what CRDs are doing. But what I didn't want was to have the field in the types.go and then not defaulting with these by reading these and actually defaulting by reading these. Because I suspect someone is going to come up and add these fields somewhere and expect the right thing to happen. And I think that
you want to actually change the defaulting function to respect this.
Yes, I think if we don't do that, then it's just wrong.
I think I think there's two possible things we could do. Automatically emitting defaulting functions is definitely one of them. The other one is emitting a test that verifies that the existing defaulting function actually fulfills the contract specified in the API. We might want that either way. Like if somebody puts in a manual defaulting function, we should enforce that it actually does what the API claims it does.
I think of the two you just mentioned, so you mentioned either we have the field and we make sure that it's actually what the code does, but someone has to do both. The other case is you put the field and everything is automatic. If we had to choose between the two, it's very obvious that we want the latter, right?
Not necessarily, because our existing, like, especially the conversion functions, we generate defaults, but then you can implement them manually however you want to, and that suppresses the generation of the default function or the conversion function. So if this works similarly, like we generate a defaulting function, but then if you write your own hand-built one, it doesn't necessarily evoke that one.
Yeah, this is not default. We should maybe call that after we've called it. Nah, because the defaulting will have defaulted, so it's not going to default.
Do we have an expressiveness problem? Do we have any cases where the logic in the defaulting function is more complicated than we could express in OpenAPI?
Yes, that happens, but I think that's fine. We're not saying we are going to get rid of all the defaulting functions.
I think it's kind of unavoidable. If you squint, the mutating admission webhooks are kind of extremely similar to defaults, but they're ones that you definitely cannot know at like statically.
So getting back to the original problem here now, there's an expectation of defaults being applied, but if the defaults cannot be expressed in OpenAPI,
so we don't have that problem because this is specifically about key fields. Defaults for value fields, server-side apply doesn't really care much about. But for key fields, it needs those to be set to even know which item in the list you're talking about. So those two have to be set statically, and I think that's a reasonable requirement. The key field defaults should be expressible statically.
Interesting. Okay, that gets back to other general expressiveness issues now. We kind of have a design rule for defaulting here.
Yeah, this would be adding a constraint to our API system, which I think is a good and useful one. It's in the category of reason why I thought we should expand this into covering more of the API than just server-side apply, because this really becomes a general constraint on schemas.
Yeah.
I think it is a good constraint, and I do think we want to, like, anything that is expressible statically, any default that is expressible statically, I think should be expressible statically in the schema, which means that we can automatically put it in API documentation and stuff like that. So I think that's just a good thing. And if we need this feature anyway, then we might as well just assume we're going to build the whole edifice and do it the correct way.
Right. My point was that we have an interesting kind of thing in the edifice, which is the concept of constraints on the complexity of defaulting in some cases. Anyway, we're past our time now.
Yeah, we're past time, and I have to go.
Daniel, do you think we need a cap for the defaulting thing? I suspect we do. Well, you need to explain how you're going to plug the, you're going to wire the defaulting.
Did we make a cap for our other server-side apply changes?
We usually make changes to the initial cap, so that the initial cap is getting better and better.
Okay, I think that should be sufficient for this also.
I think there's a new one for the declarative field manager, but
yeah, we usually have caps. This does not seem to be specifically SSA related, though.
It's not, but it's like the implementation. I'd expect it to look pretty similar to the other tags that we implemented, like the list type. Yeah, I don't know. I have to run.
Okay, see you. Thank you.
Okay, should we stop it all, or should we continue here? I have more time. I don't know what's going on with you guys.
I have a little bit of time. Yeah, let's talk and let's do it in 5 minutes. Do you want to tell us what you're doing, Kevin? I'm
still status wiping, and I try to look more into the problem I had with the CRDs, and haven't made much progress on it because it's weird. I don't know what's happening. I have to try more. I still am thinking a lot about different ways to solve this in general. It's comparable to what we discussed right now, because I would expect something like that to be represented in a schema, that a field doesn't get persisted if you change it, but it's hard to express. What I thought about would be an option to solve it in the short term would be instead of having only the strategy, to define a custom JSON schema that could generate the resetting and the field manager stuff, and put it there and run code generation on it, which could make it easier and testable because it's both generated from the same source. But that's just a thought I had over the weekend, so I'm not sure. You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, that seems very complicated. I'm super worried about that. I don't know what you think. Do you think from a kubectl server-side apply is default and works great? Do you think it's more important or less important than the apply status?
The apply status mostly seems like convenience for the user, which is important, but we had more real problems from status wiping than.
Yeah, I've put the status first in the list, because the apply status first in the list, because it's really changing the behavior for people too. Like they're not going to see the same they saw before, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to freak out if they lose that. It seems more easy to do.
Yeah, it's definitely
agreement.
Yeah.
So
it might even seem like a good first starter. Once the cap is done, it might be something quite easy to do for somebody.
I suspect so, yeah. Didn't you have code already anyway?
No, I didn't. We discussed how to do it, and I'm not sure if there is code in the cap, but I didn't think so. We discussed doing it with, you mentioned doing it with generation, and we have the old and the new objects at some point, so we could. Where is it?
Yeah, you need to know if etcd has written the object, and I think we can know that. Oh yeah, we can just compare the resource version before and after the update.
Yeah. So that's explained in there.
That's easy enough. That's super easy in terms of code. Status wiping, I'm concerned about it.
Yeah, it's a problem that Daniel had to leave now, because that's where I wanted to have his opinion.
Yeah, let's try to get Daniel to be more definitive on the apply status, and keep working on the wiping until then, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'm working on it. I won't stop working on it. I'm just concerned that A, the work will be waste of time, or B, a real problem when we bring it out and it's not complete or not good or missing something.
Yeah.
That's nothing I feel good about.
Yeah. Thank you. Jenny, do you want to talk about the things that you care about?
Like the thing we already talked about earlier, or something else?
Yeah, so it sounds like you had the, I know you've started working on the, where is it, in MISC? The directly convert CRD structural to CMD, that seems important.
Yeah, that's definitely, we need to do that now, but yeah, I can probably take on another thing that we need doing.
Well, yeah, so can you revive the PR? I'm going to look at it again now. considering I think we have a plan, we need to make the defaults part of the OpenAPI. I look at the PR this time.
Yeah, I agree that we needed to actually default the defaults from the OpenAPI have to do something. But the PR in SSA it doesn't really make a statement about that. This would be necessary no matter how we do the defaulting, and it doesn't give people the tools to accidentally think they're defaulting, since we haven't added the types.go thing or the OpenAPI thing. It's just the SSA schema change.
And to be honest, the code you have in SMD would already fix the problem for CRDs.
Right, yeah, because we'll be converting the CRD's OpenAPI separately. We can just add it there. It's true.
Cool. But yeah. So yeah, Daniel was mentioning the default code and the default, the declarative default. I think if we run the declarative default before the declarative, the defaulting code is never going to see the field missing. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if we default the TCP protocol, then the code that is supposed to default to TCP is never going to see it empty.
Yes, you mentioned the two options, like doing the generation for defaulting or testing. We could do both. So you generate only for stuff.
I'm saying the one where we compare to make sure it's the same.
Yeah.
It's not a good experience, right? You change the field and all of a sudden it tells you, hey, this doesn't work. You have to do something else. I hate it when the tools tell me, hey, you have to do something else. You're like, why don't you do it for me? And in this case, we could just say, if you have the // default on top of a field, this is going to take precedence over the code.
Yeah, or you could do the // default stuff, but on occasions where it's implemented with custom code, you don't do it and you fail for those, and people should not, it shouldn't be common to override defaulting by custom stuff. I don't know if that's a wrong assumption, but
yeah,
at least we have both worlds and it would be working and improved.
Sure, but no matter what, we need to use the default field. I mean the declarative default.
Yeah.
As the source of truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jenny, if you want to edit maybe the server-side apply cap to make sure that we all agree on how we're going to do that.
Yeah, sure. I can make a new PR to the cap.
Awesome. I'm gonna write that in the thing. I think we're good. What am I doing? I didn't talk about what I'm doing. That's a good question. None of that.
No, can't see your name.
Should I be doing something?
Depends on you.
I could try.
We still got sub-resources open.
Wow, that seems scary.
Yeah. And I'm not even sure how much related those problems are to what I'm doing right now. That's something that sometimes crosses my mind.
Yeah, it's confusing sometimes. I'll try to see what I can do. I can't promise anything right now.
Yeah. I don't know about declarative field manager right now, and I'm not caring much about it until the other stuff is resolved.
Yeah,
it's only the cap phase, but I don't know. Discussing it feels.
We don't have anything about that today. It's completely new. It doesn't work. It's not needed. It's not the highest priority.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about the future, but we should finish whatever we have and fix this. Cool. I think we're done. I'm gonna have lunch.
Yeah, one more thing is, should we schedule or discuss something about the where is it? I lost it. Status wiping with more people, like the suggestion I made, or should I just continue and try to fix it and leave it ugly? I would happily discuss it again in a
Okay, let's try and discuss it
appropriate
again.
setting.
I'll try to find some time to look at what you've done again, and
Yeah.
we can discuss it.
If you can find the time with, I don't know, Daniel, Jordan, anyone who's more into the whole wiring and process, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I think they have a more concrete opinion on it.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, then take care. Stay healthy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.